Hello everybody, I am Laura, land crew of the Sea Change crew, a team of 6 women specializing in nature technology, sustainability and environmental sciences. We are rowing around Great Britain as part of GBO Challenge 2024. Throughout our journey, we're collecting environmental data for a 4-year research project conducted by the University of Portsmouth. Additionally, we are documenting nature regenerative activities along the coastline carried out by diverse coastal communities and groups through our podcast series, Blue Pioneers. And today we're speaking with Sarah Ward, Marine Conservation Officer at the Sussex Wildlife Trusts. Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I wondered if you could introduce what the Sussex Wildlife Trust is all about and kind of your role in it.
Of course, yeah. So as our name suggests, we are based in Sussex and we are part of a movement of 48 wildlife trusts across the country. And again, as our name suggests, we're all about looking after wildlife trust in our local wildlife in our local area. So that covers terrestrial as well as the marine side of things, which is what I do, looking after nature reserves as well as championing and being a voice for nature across that geographical space.
And how was the Sussex Wildlife Trust? How did it come to be? Has it got a long history or?
Yeah, it certainly does. Yeah, we've been around for a good number of years. I think we were formed back in the 1950s or 60s, I think it was. Obviously, it started out as a small group of sort of keen naturalists that wanted to do something for the wildlife of Sussex, and it's expanded from there. We're now a fairly large organisation. We're a membership organisation, so we rely on members and donations to keep us going. But we've got quite a large number of staff now. We have a huge number of volunteers that keep us going, and we own nature reserves all across Sussex from east to west.
And how did marine conservation start? Was it always from the beginning, or was it kind of behind?
No. So the marine side of things is much newer. So the trust has been doing terrestrial work for decades, but I think we had our first marine officer in post in 2012, although there had been a few sort of smaller bits and bobs of marine and coastal work going on since then, but it was only in 2012 that the trust actually committed to having a person in post that was able to focus solely on marine. And since then, we've really expanded our marine work. So like I say, it used to just be one person doing everything. We now have a team of people doing everything from policy work to covering coastal community engagement. And we also have a pioneering marine restoration project called the Sussex Kelp Restoration Project, which is it's a big partnership project, but we have the project manager hosted at Sussex Wildlife Trust.
And what was the rationale for starting to look at the underwater environment?
Well, I think it's part of Sussex, and it's always been something that people have engaged with in terms of the sort of coastal environment. And like I said, because we are a movement of the Wildlife Trust nationally, it's something that other wildlife trusts were doing. I think some of them were more pioneering than we were. I think Cornwall have had a marine officer in post for something like 25 years. So part of it was sort of following suit as to what was going on with the other organisations that we work with around the country, but also sort of just doing what we felt was right as a trust. And like I said, it's gone from strength to strength in terms of the marine work that we do. We just keep increasing our capacity and being reactive to things that are going on around us.
And what is there to conserve in the Sussex coastal waters?
Well, there's all sorts of stuff. I think that's one of the things really that we're quite good at is trying to engage people with the wonderful underwater environment that we have here in Sussex. I think a lot of people that aren't sort of clued in with what's under there may be sort of looking out to sea thinking, oh, it's just kind of grey murkiness, not that interesting, not very appealing. Yeah. But actually, there's all sorts of stuff going on under there. We've got a whole range of different types of habitat. We've got underwater chalk reef systems. We've got various different sort of sediment habitats. And of course, all of those are so important in terms of the different animals and flora that they sustain. So we've got a range of really exciting marine mammals, from dolphins, seals, that kind of thing. We have various sharks. We have loads of different types of fish. Some of them are really colourful, things like wrasse. Of course, things like crabs and crustaceans, all those kind of things. It's just, actually having a look and seeing what's down there. And that's something that we're really keen to do, is just introduce people to the wonderful marine life that we have here in Sussex.
So even in that limited space, there's still such a diversity of habitats and types of species. And
absolutely, yeah.
And so what's the approach that the trust is taking to conserve all this diversity? Because I assume one type of habitat will require different types of protection or action, or even definitely environmental conditions than others.
Yeah. So I mean, we have various posts now that sort of do different things in terms of how we want to approach marine conservation. So that's really exciting to now have people working separately on things like policy and community engagement, because obviously, we want people to care about their local environment. That's what sort of incites behavioural change. And if people care, they can then push the decision makers and local authorities to actually, incite change in terms of the policy and that underpins, looking after our marine environment. So, we do a whole range of different things. So we engage communities, and we have a huge volunteer base that come out with us and do citizen science. We have a couple of programs which is actively collecting data about the marine ecology, both on the intertidal zone and under the water. That's shore search and sea search. We also do beach cleans, which is just a really nice sort of light touch way of getting people involved. We do that with the Marine Conservation Society. We submit beach clean data to them. So that's obviously goes into a big database which can inform decision making about how we manage waste systems. I think the cotton bud plastic ban was based on data from them, amongst various other things. Plastic straws and things as well, a lot of that was based on data that came from that programme. So getting people involved in data collection is a really nice way of getting them interested, getting them exciting, and then of course that then benefits us in terms of we've then got data to show what's there, and we work with decision makers mostly at a local scale, but obviously like I said, we work with our colleagues on national level to give them that data to find out where they've got data gaps that we can maybe go and fill in those data gaps if we can, and that can contribute to the sort of policy side of things that obviously, like I said, underpins how we look after the marine environment. So sea search in particular has really been an invaluable tool in getting marine conservation zones designated, not just in Sussex but all the way around the country, and so we're hugely proud to have been a part of that, and hopefully we'll continue to do so long into the future.
And what is sea search exactly? It seems like a great tool if it's able to contribute to marine protection areas.
Yeah, sea search is probably one of my favourite things that I get to do as part of my role. So it's a citizen science programme, and again, it's another programme that we work with the Marine Conservation Society on. So they sort of host things on a national level, and we act as the local coordinator. And what we do is we use people that are in the sea. It used to be pretty focused on scuba divers, but we're really trying to branch out now and be more inclusive of snorkelers, even sort of beach walkers for the intertidal. They need to undertake a training course to get themselves sort of up to speed with how to identify things and how to sort of survey them in a useful manner. And then after that, it's essentially just they can either go out and do their own thing and submit data to us using the tools that we've given them, or they can come out with us on the targeted surveys that we set up. Those are purely aimed at scuba divers, so we'll charter local boats, we'll go to places that we specifically want data for, and we'll take a team of divers out there, and they'll go down, survey, and bring us back a whole load of data. And it's so useful, it's fantastic, and I love being able to work with all those fantastic volunteers who are just so passionate, just want to do the good thing for the environment. It's lovely.
How many volunteers do you get that have not really an idea of what is down there, don't really know what things are, and then as they take part in Sea Search, they start learning? How many of those do you have?
Yeah, I mean, it tends to be with Sea Search, most people have somewhat of an interest because it mostly attracts scuba divers. So, of course, if you're a scuba diver, you usually have at least some idea as to what you're looking at. So we very rarely get anybody that would come into it completely without any knowledge at all. But that said, even people that come in thinking they know quite a lot, as they join more and more sea searches, and it's all about kind of interacting with other people. We spend a lot of time after the surveys just going through, looking at people's pictures, chatting about what we've seen, looking through guidebooks, and it's a really big learning curve for everybody, myself included. Like, I value so much having the volunteers that we do, because it's that opportunity to think about what we've seen. Some people have particular areas of expertise, perhaps they're a retired ecologist, or they're an active ecologist doing it in their spare time, and to have that sort of back and forth over what are we looking at here, and trying to work out what things are, it's just so much fun. But then with our intertidal version of Sea Search, which is called Shore Search, we're very much open to allowing anybody to come along to that. Usually it's just for adults because it is a survey, but because of the fact that it's a bit more open, we do get people coming along with absolutely zero expertise behind them whatsoever, and that's really great to be able to teach people, start right back at the basics. And usually you get people coming back and back year after year sometimes, it's really lovely to see that progression of not just their knowledge building up, but their interest and their enthusiasm, and sort of wanting to learn more, and what else can I do to get involved and to help the bigger cause. And it's just so rewarding to be part of that.
What do you think makes them come back? What really sticks with them of these surveys?
I think there's a whole variety of things, to be honest. I think sometimes people can be really driven when they see the results of what they're sort of getting involved with, particularly with Sea Search, when we were able to really say, this is what we've achieved, this is what Sea Search has achieved through getting those marine conservation zones designated, and other things as well. So some people obviously, like I say, are very driven by that. A lot of people, I think, really enjoy the sort of camaraderie of being amongst people that feel the same way they do, and being able to kind of just interact with people that want to dive for the same reasons. Not all dive clubs are set up because people are really into marine conservation, whereas this is specifically for that, for people that want to get involved and do something sort of a bit more almost useful, so to speak, with their diving. Adds an extra layer of interest to your dives, and if you're not sea searching, if you're doing shore search, people then will say, like, I go to the beach now and I can't help but look for things. And I think it's that sort of, almost a bit of a quest for knowledge and just understanding of what things are. And a lot of people just like to feed that appetite. And like I said,
must be empowering
it's really
to know, to be able to name things and
exactly,
know things about them.
Exactly, yeah, and understand them, sort of start seeing trends and behavioural patterns and things like that. And you can only really start appreciating that kind of thing when you are coming time and time again and seeing things, throughout different seasons, and observing different things at different places and that kind of thing.
And having a network to also exchange ideas and exchange observations. And
exactly, yeah.
Citizen science sounds like a great way to tackle both like engagement from the public and also data gaps.
Exactly, yeah, and that's exactly how we sort of use it to harness that enthusiasm of people. And we're really working at trying to extend the network of people, particularly for the intertidal area that is obviously much more accessible, to get people really enthused and potentially even just going off doing it themselves without needing leadership from us necessarily. Getting people to really care about their environment, and it's just having that sort of a program to sort of feed back into is really important, to get people just to sort of have a bit of a purpose, understand what they're doing, just getting people really enthusiastic and passionate about their local environment.
And you mentioned the protected areas. What are they like? Because I know that marine protected areas can have various levels of protection. of various rules attached to them, and also how did the data collected by Sea Search and other methods by the trust, how did that feed into creating those protected areas?
Yeah, sure. So there's a few different types of protected areas. The one that I was specifically mentioning was the marine conservation zones. So marine conservation zones are a relatively new piece of legislation. It came about with the Marine and Coastal Access Act. So we only had our first marine conservation zones designated, putting me on the spot now, trying to remember what year it was, but sort of the around 2009, I think it was, something like that. So relatively recently, and that's a piece of domestic legislation, so it wasn't at all under question when it came to Brexit or anything like that. We now have quite a number of marine conservation zones designated in Sussex, and we've also got a highly protected marine area, which has been designated last year, called Dolphin Head, which is under the same piece of legislation, but it's a much higher protection level, as its name would suggest. So those all came through with sort of, it was quite a long process to actually get them decided where they were going to be geographically, the rationale for why they were being designated, and then, of course, making sure that there was adequate data to understand what kind of condition they were in, what the targets were going to be, and what the management would be. So getting them designated was just the very first step. That's obviously getting it across that line. Then you've got to sort of think about the condition. Why is it being designated? What can we do to bring it back to the condition or maintain it in good condition? So we're very much still on that journey. We've got a few zones which have been designated for a good number of years now, and they're kind of looking at, what progress has been made and what still needs to be done. And of course, it's the statutory bodies that have a responsibility to making sure the MCZs, marine conservation zones, are doing what they should be doing. But, the picture across the board is a lot of these statutory bodies just don't have the money, the funding and the resources to do everything that they need to be doing. So they are, reliant on organisations like Sea Search to provide that extra data to them. And without wanting to, sort of fulfill their statutory obligations, we're very happy to provide that data and be those sort of eyes and ears on the ground, going out and seeing what's happening and taking our volunteers with us to do that. So like I said, that data has been feeding into that process right from the very beginning and still feeds into it now.
So conservation will be kind of centered around a certain habitat or a specific set of species that are worth protecting.
Yeah, so that's how it works for marine conservation zones, or MCZs we call them. So they'll be they're feature based. So they're distinct geographical areas, but it's all feature based. So a particular MCZ may have a number of different features. It may have particular species of interest. It may have a biological habitat or the whole physical habitat. So, for example, the Kingmere MCZ, which is offshore, sort of Worthington, Littlehampton, that's the main sort of known feature for it is the black sea bream. And the reason that is a designated feature is because they use that site throughout the sort of spring, early summer as a breeding ground. And the particular sort of physical habitat that the bream like to use is what is found within that site. So it's very protected for them, and it's got a seasonal protection as well, so that they're protected at that sort of really important time of year when they're there doing their breeding and having their nests and making sure that they're able to do that successfully.
Yeah, seasonal protection is interesting because I think it used to be very static, right? It was geographic based, and then kind of temporal changes in the level of protection were introduced. And species have a different life cycle even, or stages.
And it's really important that we're seeing more of that, because it means that you're kind of taking into account what the what the actual important thing is that's happening here, and also allowing you to sort of balance the needs of other sea users as well. So a lot of people use the Kingmere for recreational angling, for example, and by having a seasonal closure, they're still able to use that site, but they're not able to use it in a destructive way during the time that's the most important time for the bream, which is obviously their breeding season. So, it's sort of balancing those needs. It's a bit of a playoff, balancing the socioeconomic needs against the conservation needs. But, you've got to find that balance, and temporal closures is a way of doing that.
That's great. So to protect all these areas that Sussex coastal waters have, the Sussex Wildlife Trust has something called the Living Seas program, and there's various themes and projects within that program. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So my role actually used to be called the Living Seas Officer. I've recently just changed to the Marine Conservation Officer, which probably is a little bit easier for the general public to understand what I do. But so it used to be a very broad role that really covered kind of a bit of everything. But like I say, now we have more staff involved. We've been able to segregate our work out a little bit better. So yeah, we still kind of have the term Living Seas because that's nationally, that's our kind of aim. We want our seas to be, living seas that are, recovering from past damage, that people enjoy, that kind of thing. But we can sort of really encompass any of our marine work into that sort of broad context. But like I said earlier, we have various different themes of our work. So we're looking at nature recovery, we're looking at policy that underpins all of that protection, and we're looking at community engagement. I would say those are probably our three headline themes, and then everything else kind of comes out from underneath those.
So nature recovery, policy, and public engagement.
Yeah.
Let's start with nature recovery. What kind of work is the Trust doing on that theme?
So our principal programme that we have at the moment, like I said, is the Sussex Kelp Recovery Project, and we have a particular officer in post specifically managing that whole project, because it's not a small thing. It's a huge piece of work, and by no means would Sussex Wildlife Trust suggest that we're undertaking the whole thing on our own. It's a big partnership project, various different organisations involved, including universities, other NGOs. There's all sorts of people involved in it, and everybody's sort of playing a small part. But like I said, we host the sort of manager whose job it is to sort of bring everyone together, make sure everyone's moving forward on the same trajectory, and with the idea that hopefully in the future we can recover the lost kelp beds that Sussex once had along the coastline, which sadly are no longer there. Obviously, with an appreciation that things have changed physically, environmentally from when they did exist. But we're all about kind of nature-based solutions and letting nature lead the way, and sort of it's more about sort of monitoring progress and alleviating the pressures on the marine environment to allow that kelp the chance to recover itself.
Why do we want kelp to come back?
Well, kelp is a hugely important species. It's it's a group of species, I suppose. So it can create a biological habitat, which is not only important for for other species that might rely on it for various reasons, like a nursery ground, places to hide. It creates a sort of three-dimensional habitat for all sorts of things to use. It's also really important in carbon cycling. We wouldn't so much say that it's in these kind of coastal waters that it's really good at carbon sequestration, because we just don't know enough about it, but certainly carbon cycling, and also coastal protection. In sort of high enough densities, kelp forests can sort of alleviate some of the pressure, when you get coastal storms and things like that, can act as a natural form of coastal defence. So there's all manner of different benefits from having that kind of biological habitat that's created by the kelp. And it was, you only have to sort of talk to various sea users that were out to sea in sort of like the 80s and before for them to say, it was a huge piece of, local environment that has just completely been lost in quite a short space of time. And there's a huge passion to want to bring that back, and all of the biodiversity that's associated with it as well.
Do we know what happened and why we lost them?
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, with absolute certainty, exactly what the underlying reasons for, but there's a number of different reasons that we sort of are able to attribute to it. So, of course, there's changes in fishing practices. So we're using better technology that can be somewhat more destructive. Climate change is obviously changing things generally. And then, of course, there were a number of big storm events back in the 1980s. And obviously, kelp is a relatively fragile species. It will get knocked about. Some of it's quite seasonal as well. So, if you've got kelp species that die off towards the end of the summer and then you get these big storms, it's all going to get sort of knocked about. And, if you've then got space where the kelp has been knocked away by storms, that then opens it up to these fishing vessels that may have sort of, taken advantage, so to speak, of the fact that it got knocked away for a season. So there's a whole range of different factors at play. We wouldn't sort of be able to pinpoint exactly, yes, this is the particular reason. It's various different reasons all happening at once, and other environmental changes as well. Sedimentation is something that the group is looking into quite a lot, because that's obviously creates changes in the water column, and sort of chemical changes in the water as well. So yeah, too many reasons to pinpoint one, and they're all sort of being looked at to varying degrees.
Is there still a kind of dense kelp area in Sussex? Or is that regrowing at the moment?
Yeah, there's nowhere sort of big. There's patches of kelp that are sort of recovering in various areas that, sort of particularly in the middle of the summer where it's the high season for plant life, there's patches that are either recovering or doing quite well, but certainly nowhere near as the extent when it was originally there historically. So, but, these things take time. We're not expecting that things are just going to happen overnight. You've got to give nature time to recover itself, and often it may be that you've got kind of stages to recovery. So we're looking at what might those sort of pioneering things be that we're looking for before the kelp starts to fully recover itself.
What's it like to dive in the kelp, even in its current state?
Well, I haven't actually dived it myself, but we took some volunteers out to a site where it's relatively sort of untouched, because of the sort of topography under the water. It's not somewhere that you get a lot of sort of fishing going on, particularly bottom toe trawling. And the divers came back up really pleasantly surprised and were really excited that on their forms they were able to sort of tick, yes, we saw kelp, and it was actually, I wouldn't say that it constituted a kelp forest, but certainly we would use the term kelp park, which is where, you've sort of got, kelp sort of sporadically around. Yeah, it's the same as, you've got your forest on land, you've got your park on land that might have trees here and there. That was kind of the same terminology. And of course, you have kelp, you have life associated with it. So they were all really super pleased when they came back up from that particular dive.
Amazing. What kind of other, if any, nature recovery projects are you involved in at the Trust?
So there's nothing else specifically that we're involved in terms of the marine recovery, but there are other projects going on around the country, and our next door neighbours at Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust, they're involved in the Solent restoration scheme, which is a really exciting one, looking at oysters and seagrass. So there's various things going on around the country, but we don't want to take on too much. The Sussex Kelp Recovery Project is a pretty huge project, and we don't want to bite off more than we can chew. So we're good with that for now, but we're always looking for opportunities to recover and enhance our marine environment. And
how long has the Living Seas program been going on? Was it since 2012 or whenever?
Yeah, I mean, it's
kind of at the beginning.
Yeah, it's pretty much been kind of a thing since we started doing our marine work. I mean, I think it's just the name really that we give to our sort of marine work. So, and again, what we use on a national level as well. But like I said, we've had an officer doing marine work in various guises since about 2012. So, and we intend to have marine officers in post, indefinitely.
What's it like to work with policymakers, and how do you communicate the data from all the citizen science projects that you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting role that we play when it comes to sort of policy and that kind of thing, because we we can be sort of quite independent. We act as a critical friend to a lot of the sort of statutory agencies. We do maintain good working relationships with them and, the people that work for those agencies. But we also, we know how to sort of put our views forward if we feel that something that they're doing, isn't quite how we would want it seen. The critical friend is a good way to sort of describe what we do there. And we are always we would answer consultations, get involved in planning applications, that kind of thing. And this goes for the terrestrial as well as the marine. My role actually sits in our conservation team, so I work quite closely with my sort of terrestrial counterparts. And then, of course, a lot of that work overlaps both terrestrial and coastal, particularly if you've got sort of planning things happening in the coastal environment, it may affect the marine environment. So it's quite a complicated picture, and, we have to sort of keep our eyes on lots of different things and, thinking about, things at council level, things at the marine management organisation level, and then, of course, working with our national team as well on things like nationally important infrastructure projects and how that might be affecting us locally. So it's a complicated business and an ever-changing landscape. And then, of course, you've got to keep yourself updated in terms of the policies that are in place. Things change, and it's, like I say, very complicated, but it's an interesting part of the work, certainly.
Would you say that policy, nature recovery, or like in this case the Sussex Kelp Recovery Project, and citizen science, would you say that occupies your time kind of equally between the three of them? Is there one that is more important or that takes more time?
It's different at different times of year. Like I said, my role specifically now, I don't do an awful lot on the kelp recovery programme because we have a specific person in post. Although I was involved, in sort of setting it up years ago and getting us, a seat at the table kind of thing. But I can sort of put that to one side because there's somebody whose particular job it is to do that. Over the summer, we do a lot more citizen science stuff. Obviously, with it can be quite seasonal, particularly with the ecology. A lot of stuff dies back over the winter, and we don't get as many takers joining us on the beach in the freezing cold wind and rain, funnily enough. So we tend to fill our summers up with that kind of really active public engagement. Spend the winters, obviously, writing reports and things like that based on that, and then the policy tends to be a bit more ad hoc. And we some things that are kind of, gurgling away all the time. And then other things we have to be quite reactive as to, somebody's put in a planning application or somebody's applied for a marine license. And we just have to be able to react to that as and when they occur. So, sometimes you can feel, my goodness, my diary is completely full. I've got no time to do anything. And then other times it's like, oh, actually, there's been nothing come in. I can relax and, get on with whatever else has been put to one side. So I guess that's what I kind of enjoy is, no day is the same.
Very dynamic job.
Indeed. Yeah.
How did you get into this job? Were you always set on doing marine conservation work?
I think so, yeah. I've always been really interested in the underwater environment, and I learned to scuba dive when I was 16 and always sort of thought I would do something to do with that. And then when I did an undergraduate degree in marine biology, and after that I actually was looking for opportunities, to sort of get a bit of work experience, and the trust had just had their first marine officer in post at that point, and I basically just went and knocked on the door and said, hello, I'd like to do some volunteering and work experience. So they very kindly took me on as a volunteer and got my foot in the door, and at some point in a few years down the line the job came up and I was lucky enough to be able to be taken for it. So it's really interesting sort of line of work to have gone through as a volunteer and then come into now as staff, but definitely I'm definitely an advocate for getting involved as a volunteer or work experience to learn more about the sort of thing you might want to do.
And what made you want to start scuba diving in the first place?
Well, I was really lucky actually that I was taken on a family holiday to Australia when I was younger because we had family over there, and we went and did some snorkeling over there. And I'm trying to think how old I was, maybe about 13. And obviously, you know, it's completely different to the underwater scenes that we have over here, but it just totally sparked something in me. And the rest is history, really. Then started looking at actually, you know, what we've got here on our coast and under our waters are pretty interesting as well, marginally less colourful. Obviously, we don't have lovely less coral warm. Reef systems. Yeah, less warm. Yeah. But, you know, actually, once you start looking at the detail, if that's something that interests you, then it doesn't matter where you are, what the temperature is. It's inherently interesting. And yeah, just love it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm also a scuba diver. I have to say, but yeah, it's fascinating what you can see in the water. Even here, I started scuba diving in the Mediterranean in Malta, which was a little bit clearer waters, a bit more fish around, a bit more octopus and stuff like that. But when you know kind of where to dive here and what to look for, it's just beautiful and lots
exactly. And I think going back to sea search, that's the beauty of sea search. You know, I think in the UK, you know, it's not quite as one, you know, crystal clear waters and things don't sort of present themselves to you in quite the same way. But if you know what you're looking at, it makes it more interesting, which is why I'm always such an advocate. If I, you know, meet someone says, oh, I do diving in the UK, I'm like, do you do sea search? You should get involved. You'll love it. It will really enhance your diving. Yeah, and then usually once you get people in the door, they're like, oh, I never knew that. And now I'm seeing things that I never saw before. So yeah, big advocate for getting involved in sea search.
Yep, I have done sea search. I go with Mike Freshworth.
Oh yeah, I love
coordinator. So I'm booked on a couple dives this summer. Yeah,
excellent.
It's really nice. Yeah. What's your after how many years have you been working at the trust?
I think about 8 years, coming up 8, I think. Lose track.
So with those 8 years behind you, what vision do you have for marine ecosystems of Sussex and also in the country?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always remain hopeful. I think we have to be dynamic in our approach to what we're actually trying to do and trying to achieve, because, you know, everything is changing. I think at the moment, particularly climate change is a big one as to, you know, what's it going to do. We have to sort of think about it on a global scale, but of course with us, we act local. What can we do locally to sort of help the environment adapt and you know, sort of still function with regards to climate change. I think, you know, we've recently had a new sort of plan in place to try and focus our work a little bit better, and we've got some very broad sort of focus areas of how we're pushing our work forward. But all of that is, you know, thinking about the bigger picture and, you know, how are things changing around us and how can we be adaptive and dynamic at the same time as making sure that we're continuing to focus on you know, the sort of smaller targets that we have locally. So yeah, I think, like I say, it's just a case of really making sure that we're still pushing the agendas that we've always been pushing, but doing so in a way that is you know, thinking about how things are changing around us and how things are adapting to the changes around us. There's, yeah, lots to think about, complicated business, but I always try and remain hopeful that, you know, all is not lost, and there are a lot of passionate people that do want to look after our environment, and yeah, it's good to be amongst them.
For people who do want to do exactly that, put time in protecting marine ecosystem. Maybe they've snorkeled for the first time, maybe they've done scuba diving for the first time and they've seen how beautiful it is and they want to conserve it. What's the way that they can come volunteer for the trust or get in touch and do some sea search? Or
yeah, so there's various things that people can do, whether they want to sort of be actively involved or you know, just kind of almost passively involved. You know, there's you can get involved with us as a volunteer. We've got a whole load of information on our website that's easily accessible and tells you, you know, the various options that might be accessible to you. or, you know, if you're not someone that wants to do something quite so active, just learning and sharing the messaging is super useful, particularly in this day of social media. That's a major helpful thing to do. And like I said earlier, we are a membership organisation, and a lot of people now are sort of thinking, you know, how can I put my money where my mouth is? Find an organisation that resonates with you. It may not be the Wildlife Trust, but there are plenty of organisations that are membership or, you know, funded by donations that perhaps you feel that, you know, that resonates with you, what they're doing. And that's a brilliant way to really help the cause if you're not in a position to actually actively be able to get out there and do some sort of in-person volunteering and getting stuck in.
Where can people follow the Trust's work on marine conservation?
Yeah, so we're on all the kind of major social media platforms. So X, as it's now called, Facebook, Instagram, and of course we have our own website as well, which is sussexwildlifetrust.org.uk.
Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you so much. Did you want to add anything else? Final words?
No, I don't think so. Like I say, thank you for having me. It's been really nice to chat about the work that we do.
Thanks for supporting the project that we have, or of collating all of these stories from around the coastline. And there's a really cool picture that's building up with kelp restoration, oyster restoration, seagrass restoration, community engagement, lots of citizen science. It's really great to hear all these stories, and it's really inspiring and hopeful and very positive.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to be part of that picture.
Thanks. Have a nice day.
Thank
Bye.
you.